So let's jump right in. Can you guys see my screen? Can I just see a thumbs up or something if everybody can? Yeah, awesome. Okay. So let's start with Richard's photo. This is Richard's JPEG. And he sent me a little write-up about it. Richard, why don't you just unmute your mic and tell us about your photo here. Basically, what are we looking at? Why, what was your intention when you took the photo? And what in particular would you like feedback on?
Okay, so first of all, this photo was taken in the southeastern city of Gyeongju in South Korea. What you're looking at is obviously a rock cluster, but it's an underwater tomb of, Jason, you could help me out here, of one of the old kings of Korea.
I'm not sure if that's it's an actual tomb, like there's somebody under there, or if it's like a fable or myth or something like that.
Maybe, yeah. So basically, when taking the picture, what I saw basically was layers. There wasn't really anything except the color graduation in the sky. So what I wanted to do was use the water as the foreground. I threw on a 10-stop filter to smooth it out. I used the rocks as the midground, and then unfortunately the somewhat boring sky there as the background. So initially, basically what I saw in that scene was the 3 layers, and that's what I tried to capture there.
You also mentioned that the king gave specific instructions to be buried in the East Sea after his death so that he would become a dragon and protect Shilla from the Japanese intruders. So this was, there's quite a story behind these rocks. Like so I think having a caption to this photo, when you do share this photo with people, you really need to, I would definitely add in 2 or 3 sentences or even a little bit more about this story behind this, because it means a lot. Otherwise, if people who aren't from Korea, when they see this, they'll just be like, oh, it's
just a cluster of rocks. Yeah.
But the story really sells this, I think. So the caption is super important when you are showing or sharing this on social media or telling people about it. I would definitely really dig into the story. That would be my first thing. Let's see, was there anything in particular that you wanted feedback on about this photo, like either composition or technical aspects? If there's nothing, that's okay, but is there something in particular that you were really looking for some feedback on?
Maybe, something small, maybe in the editing, if you could compare the raw to the final JPEG image. There was only one aspect that I was unsure of, and I know obviously your opinion on your final product is the only opinion that really matters. It was the shadows in the rocks themselves. I kind of have a feeling I brought the shadows out a little too much.
Actually, I was going to say the opposite. My initial opinion was that you could have brought the shadows in the rocks out more, but this is definitely just a matter of taste. But for me, so let's look at the raw file. For me, since the rocks are such an important part of this story, I would like to see more definition in the rocks. Here, like the blacks in the rocks are, they're kind of muddy, like you just lose the detail because the black is so intense in the actual rocks themselves. Like it's just pure black. So for example, this here, like it looks like this is a little bit underexposed. So I would have shot this maybe 1 or 2 stops over more than what you see here, overexpose this more, because at this point here, you lost a lot of the information in the rocks.
Right.
If you were to overexpose this, then the sky might be slightly overexposed, but you could easily bring that back. So if we bring the shadows all the way, so let's just see. What I like to do sometimes is I go straight to the auto, just to get an idea of what the computer, what the algorithm would do. So it usually tends to overexpose it a bit, but you can see that it brought up the exposure, it brought up the whites, it brought up the shadows. I would even if we bring up the shadows more, we can see, let's zoom in. So you can see, since it was underexposed, you kind of lost some color and detail. It's
pretty noisy, isn't it?
and it's very noisy, right? So if you overexpose this slightly by 1 or 2 stops, you would have brought out more detail in the rocks. And then I'm sure you could have recovered this not overexposed. It would be the sky would be slightly overexposed, but you could easily bring it back because the sky isn't very intense. You're not shooting into the sun, for example. So
Right.
even with just one shot, one exposure, I think you'd be able to bring that out more. And then I might, when you're doing this, maybe bring up, let's bring up like a little bit of clarity. And they have this new slider, the texture, which looks nice. So if we just exaggerate it, you can see how much more detail there are.
Yeah.
That's really intense. I wouldn't do that, but just to show you an example. But maybe I'd bring it out a little bit more. So you wouldn't have to have it this bright, but I think definitely let us see. Me personally, since the rocks are such a central theme in your story, I would want to see more detail in the rocks like this.
Sure.
But again, this is just my own personal taste. And maybe it might some people might prefer it as a silhouette, something totally black. And of course I would, when editing this raw file, I like the colors. I really do like the layers and the colors in the sky. Jason, what would you add?
Actually, funnily enough, I believe Richard was with me, or I was with
we shot this together.
2 feet to the right of him at this. So I do have a little bit of insider knowledge. Trivia, a little bit of trivia. The ashes of the King Munmu are indeed buried under these rocks. So it is indeed a certified tomb. But I do agree with a lot of what Pete was saying about the rocks. Because this day was particularly challenging as there's no definition in the sky. What this basically is doing is you're limiting down to the essential elements of what makes up this photo. I do like the negative space in the top part of the image, but again, it's just empty space. So there's something that you may want to do with that, either cool it down with a graduated filter in Lightroom or brighten it up would be another way to go, just to add sort of that graduation. And you can see what Pete's doing here. It's just
like
adding.
This or the other way? Or like this? You mean cool down the top part or the bottom, or the whole thing in general?
Just cool down the top part, and just add in that sort of like, oh, maybe even warm it up, Pete. Maybe go the other way, Pete. Yeah, there you go.
Warm it up, Pete. I'm about to.
And so what we got here, again, because when I step back from this, I'm looking at a layered image. And because there are no clouds that day, we're really sort of dealing with the essential elements, the shapes. And knowing this location, if you cropped it in anymore to emphasize the tomb here, you're going to lose the part of the rocks on that side of the image. So you really got to keep it those dimensions. Otherwise, because there's no sun at this moment in time, this was right before the sunrise, right, Richard? This is right.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I wouldn't go with a silhouette on this. So I would bring out the rocks a little bit more in this, and I would say, ooh, that's wow. And I'd also say, like, I think because you had the 10 stop on there, you could almost do something like lower the contrast level of the water in the front, so it has that less sort of contrasty, more milky, silky look to it, and that will sort of contrast the sharpness of the rocks there. So I think you can fiddle around with that. Because
You can
again, like
also-
one of the, oh, sorry.
You can also bring down the clarity to smooth it out. So a lot of times when we use the clarity, you are increasing it, but you could also, to give it that smooth look, you could reduce the clarity. I really like that because this now smooth lower part kind of matches this the smoothness of the upper part. And also this texture, the texture slider, you can also go opposite too and get that kind of effect. So.
Yeah, and that's what you're sort of going for. Like when I use the filters, I'm just trying to see if I've got anything. I really sort of want that water to be like gone because in my mind the emphasis here is on the jagged rocks of that tomb, and because there's no contrast in the sky, you really want those rocks to sort of like pop out from the image. So you're going to be focusing on texture and color. So for this one, yeah, like I would say smooth out the water so it's nice and silky, pop up that color in the sky, and then just have those jagged rocks right there. That would be my lengthy suggestion.
Awesome. I didn't think about the smoothing the water, but I think it makes a huge difference. How about you, Anthony? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Definitely bring the rocks out more. I mean, I love what you've done with the water there. Just the changes that you've made, that and like sort of the way that now matches the sky. That's really cool. But yeah, definitely, I would bring the rocks out. That would be the one thing I would sort of do the most, and just add some more of that detail of those rocks.
I love the feedback because I don't usually think of localized adjustments per se, rather than, I usually adjust the image as a whole. So targeting specifically the water, the foreground water, smoothing it out, the shadows in the rocks, and working on it sort of layer by layer, I guess, rather than as an image as a whole. I think, that's something I should think about more. So I like that. I appreciate it.
Whenever I'm editing a photo or shooting a photo, a lot of times I'm thinking in opposites, kind of like yin and yang. And one thing could be like colors, and this has that warm tone on the top and it has the cool tone on the bottom. But also another set of opposites is textures. So you have this really smooth foreground, and then you have this smooth sky, and then you have these kind of rough jagged edges on the rocks. And so when you're editing, think of that, like, how can I make half of the photo smooth or one part of the photo smooth, and then bring out the smoothness like we did with the foreground, and then how can I make half of that photo more rough and give it more texture, more feel to it. Okay, excellent. Let's move on to the next photo. Thanks for sharing, Richard.
Thanks for the feedback.
No problem. Let's go to Anthony's photo next.
Today's episode was brought to you by my course, Adventures in Outdoor Photography. If you have blurry photos, uninspiring compositions, or don't know which settings to use, I highly recommend you check out my course to learn how to shoot landscapes like a pro. You'll get full lifetime access to all 15 lessons. That's 3.5 hours of video, which includes my raw files, my buyer's guide, and you get a 60-day money-back guarantee. To learn more, click on the link in the description or go to thenomadwithin.com/landscape-photography-course.